The diplomatic vessel. Harmony's edge hung in the void between Earth and the Centauri system, its gleaming hull reflecting the distant stars. Inside the main conference chamber, Ambassador Elena Rodriguez sat across from three representatives of the Zephyrian collective, their blue-scaled faces betraying nothing of their intentions. The Zephyrians had been humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, arriving at Earth's doorstep 6 months ago with promises of trade, knowledge exchange, and peaceful coexistence. Their technology far exceeded humanity's, their ships moved through space like poetry in motion, and their offers seemed too good to be true. As it turned out, they were. Dr. Marcus Chen, the expedition's xenobiologist, watched from the observation deck as the formal dinner began. The Zephyrians had insisted on preparing the meal themselves, claiming it was a crucial part of their diplomatic customs. They had spent hours in the ship's kitchen, working with ingredients they had brought from their homeworld. "The aroma is quite unique," Elena said politely as the first course was served. The dish resembled a purple soup with floating crystalline structures that caught the light like tiny prisms. The lead Zephyrian, who went by the name Veltar, nodded with what humans had learned to recognize as their equivalent of a smile. "This is Keth Moran, a traditional celebratory dish from our homeworld. We believe you will find it most transformative." Elena lifted her spoon, but Dr. Chen's voice crackled through her hidden earpiece. "Wait, something's wrong." She paused, the spoon halfway to her lips. "Is there a problem with the dish? I wouldn't want to violate any customs." Veltar's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "There are no customs to violate. Please, enjoy." In the observation deck, Dr. Chen was frantically analyzing the atmospheric readings from the dining chamber. His instruments were detecting trace amounts of a complex organic compound that hadn't been there before the Zephyrians began cooking. The molecular structure was unlike anything in Earth's databases, but the toxicity indicators were screaming warnings. "Elena, don't eat that," he whispered into his communicator. "I'm reading massive toxicity warnings. Whatever that is, it's not food." Elena set down her spoon with diplomatic grace. "Perhaps you could tell me more about this dish first? I'm quite interested in alien cuisine." The three Zephyrians exchanged glances. The second one, introduced as Kexmari, leaned forward. "It is simply nutrients arranged in our traditional manner. There is nothing more to explain." "Oh, but I disagree," Elena said, her smile never wavering. "Every dish tells a story. The ingredients, the preparation methods, the cultural significance. As a representative of humanity, I'd love to learn more." Dr. Chen was now running full spectral analyses on the compound. The results made his blood run cold. The substance was engineered to target human DNA specifically, designed to unravel human cellular structure from the inside out. It wasn't just poison. It was a biological weapon tailored for human extinction. "Elena," he whispered urgently, "you need to get out of there. Now." But Elena was just getting started. "You know, Dr. Chen, our xenobiologist would be fascinated by this. Would it be possible for him to join us? He's particularly interested in alien biochemistry." Veltar's scales seemed to darken slightly. "That would not be appropriate for this ceremony." Of course," Elena nodded. "But perhaps after the ceremony? I'm sure he'd love to get the recipe." The word recipe seemed to strike the Zephyrians like a physical blow. They exchanged rapid glances, and their translator devices picked up fragments of their native language before switching back to English. "Recipe?" Kexmari asked slowly. "Yes, the recipe," Elena repeated cheerfully. "If this is a traditional dish from your homeworld, I'd love to be able to prepare it for other humans." "Cultural exchange is such an important part of diplomacy, don't you think?" Dr. Chen was now sprinting toward the dining chamber, his tablet clutched in his hand. He'd completed his analysis, and the results were both terrifying and fascinating. The compound was indeed designed to kill humans, but there was something else, something that made him understand Elena's strategy. He burst into the dining chamber just as Veltar was stammering about the complexity of the preparation. "Ambassador Rodriguez," Dr. Chen said loudly, "I've completed my analysis of the atmospheric compounds in this chamber." The Zephyrians went rigid. "And?" Elena asked innocently. "The chemical signature of this dish is absolutely fascinating," Dr. Chen announced, pulling up his tablet's display. "The primary active ingredient appears to be a complex alkaloid chain that would interact very interestingly with human biochemistry." Veltar stood abruptly. "We should perhaps postpone this meal." "Oh, but Dr. Chen," Elena interrupted, "what kind of interaction? You look excited." Dr. Chen grinned, understanding her play perfectly. "Well, Ambassador, based on the molecular structure, this compound would likely produce effects similar to capsaicin, the active ingredient in chili peppers, but magnified about 1,000 times. The burning sensation would be extraordinary." The Zephyrians looked confused and horrified. Elena clapped her hands together. "A super chili! How wonderful! You know, humans have a bit of a reputation for enjoying spicy food. Some of us even compete to see who can handle the hottest peppers." "It would kill you," Kexmari blurted out, then immediately looked like he wanted to take the words back. "Kill us?" Elena asked with mock surprise. "Dr. Chen, would it really kill us?" Dr. Chen was studying his readings more carefully now. "Well, it would certainly cause severe physiological stress, massive inflammation response, cellular breakdown, organ failure. But you know, humans have survived some pretty extreme toxin exposures before. Remember the story of Rasputin? Or those Australian Irukandji jellyfish survivors?" Elena nodded thoughtfully. "And there was that case study about the man who accidentally ate pure capsicum extract and survived." The third Zephyrian, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. You would attempt to consume something that would cause such suffering?" "Attempt to consume it?" Elena laughed. "Sir, you clearly haven't met many humans. We're the species that looked at milk from other animals and thought, I should drink that. We're the ones who saw poisonous fish and thought, I bet I can prepare that safely. We found plants that cause chemical burns and turned them into cuisine." Dr. Chen was pulling up files on his tablet. "Ambassador, should I show them the Carolina Reaper challenge videos?" "Oh yes, please do." Dr. Chen turned his tablet toward the Zephyrians and played a compilation video of humans voluntarily eating peppers that were hot enough to cause temporary blindness, while others cheered them on. The Zephyrians watched in what could only be described as horrified fascination. "Your species," Veltar said slowly, "voluntarily inflicts pain upon itself for entertainment." "Among other reasons," Elena confirmed. "We also do it for bragging rights, for social bonding, for tradition, and sometimes just because we're curious about what it feels like." Kexmari leaned forward, his scales having shifted to a pale green color. "But this substance we have prepared, it would cause agony beyond anything your peppers could produce." "Well," Dr. Chen said, examining his readings again, "the molecular structure suggests it would bind to pain receptors about 10,000 times more efficiently than capsaicin. So yes, it would be intense." Elena's eyes lit up. 10,000 times? That's incredible. I know at least a dozen people back on Earth who would want to try this immediately. The Zephyrians sat in stunned silence. "In fact," Elena continued, "if you're willing to share the recipe, I bet we could set up some kind of cultural exchange program. Humans love trying extreme foods, and this would definitely qualify as extreme." "You cannot be serious," Veltar whispered. Dr. Chen looked up from his tablet. "Actually, Ambassador, I've been thinking about the biochemistry here. If we could synthesize this compound in smaller doses, it might have practical applications. Pain management research, potentially even nerve damage treatment. The way it binds to neural receptors could be revolutionary for medical science. Elena nodded enthusiastically. See? This isn't just about the challenge, though that's certainly part of it. This could be genuinely beneficial to both our species. Kexmari made a sound that their translator rendered as confused static. Let me make sure I understand, Veltar said slowly. We have prepared a substance designed to cause you maximum suffering and death, and your response is to ask for the recipe? That's correct, Elena confirmed. Though I would appreciate it if you could provide safety guidelines and maybe suggest appropriate dosages for beginners. Beginners? The third Zephyrian's voice had risen to what sounded like a squeak. Well, yes, Dr. Chen said reasonably. You can't just throw someone into the deep end with something this intense. We'd need to work up to it gradually. Maybe start with a diluted version, say, only 100 times stronger than Carolina Reapers, and build up tolerance from there. Elena was taking notes on her tablet. And we definitely want to establish proper medical protocols, have trained medical staff standing by, maybe develop antidotes or neutralizing agents for people who bite off more than they can chew. The Zephyrians were now staring at the humans with expressions that suggested their entire worldview was collapsing. You are the most terrifying species we have ever encountered, Veltar said quietly. Elena looked genuinely surprised. Terrifying? Why? We're just interested in your culture. You speak casually of deliberately poisoning yourselves for recreation. Well, Dr. Chen said, when you put it like that, it does sound a bit odd. But humans have always had a complicated relationship with potentially dangerous experiences. We climb mountains that can kill us, we dive into deep waters, we explore caves and remote places, we eat things that probably shouldn't be eaten. We play sports that involve deliberately running into each other at high speed, Elena added helpfully. We jump out of perfectly good aircraft with only fabric parachutes to save us. Some humans even participate in activities called extreme sports, where the entire point is to flirt with danger. Kexmari was making that static sound again. The difference, Elena continued, is that we do these things by choice, with full knowledge of the risks, and with appropriate safety measures when possible. It's not about being reckless. It's about pushing boundaries and exploring what's possible. Dr. Chen nodded. And in this case, it's also about cultural exchange. You've shared something significant from your world with us. Even if it wasn't intended as a gift, the fact remains that you've introduced us to something completely new. The silence stretched for long moments before Veltar spoke again. The substance we prepared? It was not intended as a gift. It was intended as a weapon. Elena's expression didn't change. I suspected as much. The question is, what do you want to do now? Veltar seemed to struggle with concepts his language couldn't express. Our plan was to eliminate your species because we believed you would pose a threat to galactic stability, your tendency toward violence, your rapid technological advancement, your unpredictable nature. And now? Dr. Chen asked quietly. Now we are beginning to think, Kexmari said slowly, that we may have dramatically underestimated the scope of your unpredictability. Elena smiled. That's probably fair. We do have a tendency to surprise people. The third Zephyrian finally found his voice again. You truly wish to learn how to prepare this substance, even knowing it could kill you? Especially knowing it could kill you, Elena confirmed. The best human achievements often come from figuring out how to do things that seemed impossible or too dangerous. Dr. Chen was already opening a new file on his tablet. We'd want to start with a complete molecular breakdown, understand the synthesis process, identify any potential stabilizers or inhibitors. And we'd want to understand the cultural context, Elena added. What does this dish represent in your society? When is it traditionally prepared? What's the significance of the ingredients? Veltar looked at his companions, then back at the humans. You realize that by asking these questions, you are treating what was meant to be your execution as an educational opportunity. That's a very human thing to do, Elena acknowledged. We have a saying, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Though in this case, it might be more accurate to say, when aliens give you poison, ask for the recipe and turn it into extreme cuisine. The Zephyrians sat in contemplative silence for several minutes. Finally, Veltar spoke. The compound is synthesized from the crystalline structures of a plant that grows only in the volcanic regions of our homeworld. The preparation process requires temperatures that would vaporize most substances, and the timing must be precise to the millisecond. Elena began taking detailed notes while Dr. Chen recorded everything on his tablet. As Veltar continued explaining the complex process, describing safety protocols that would be necessary even for Zephyrian handlers, Elena found herself genuinely impressed by the sophistication of the preparation. "This is fascinating," she said when Veltar finished. "The level of chemical precision required is extraordinary. Your people must have incredible knowledge of biochemistry." "We do," Kexmari said, his scales shifting to a slightly warmer color. "Our civilization has spent millennia perfecting our understanding of biological systems. And you use that knowledge to create a weapon specifically designed to target humans," Dr. Chen observed. "That suggests you've studied human biology quite extensively." The Zephyrians exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We have," Veltar admitted. "We have been observing your species for some time, analyzing your biological systems, your social structures, your technological capabilities." "Preparing for invasion?" Elena asked matter-of-factly. "Preparing for prevention," Veltar corrected. "Your species shows patterns that, in our experience, lead to galactic conflict. Rapid expansion, aggressive resource acquisition, willingness to engage in warfare." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "Those are fair observations. Humans do have a history of conflict and expansion, but we also have a history of adaptation and learning. The fact that you are sitting here having this conversation instead of launching a retaliatory strike suggests that perhaps your observations were incomplete," Dr. Chen added. Kexmari made a sound that the translator rendered as a rueful laugh. "We prepared for every possible human response except the one you actually chose." "Which was?" "Curiosity, enthusiasm, the desire to learn and understand rather than simply react with violence." Elena smiled. "To be fair, there are probably humans who would react with violence if they knew what you'd attempted. But there are also humans who would react with fascination, others who would try to turn it into a business opportunity, and probably a few who would want to use it for performance art." "Performance art?" The third Zephyrian sounded alarmed. "Don't ask," Dr. Chen said quickly. "Some things about human culture are too strange to explain in one conversation." As the evening continued, the conversation shifted from the specifics of the poison preparation to broader discussions of human and Zephyrian culture. Elena found herself genuinely enjoying the exchange, even as she remained aware that she was essentially having dinner with beings who had attempted to commit genocide against her species. The Zephyrians, for their part, seemed to be experiencing a fundamental shift in their understanding of what humanity represented. Their careful plans, based on observations of human conflict and expansion, had not accounted for humanity's capacity for turning threats into opportunities and enemies into teachers. When the formal dinner finally ended, Veltar approached Elena with something that might have been respect in his posture. "Ambassador Rodriguez," he said, "we came here believing that humanity was a threat that needed to be eliminated. We leave confused, but also intrigued." "Confusion can be the beginning of understanding," Elena replied, "and intrigue is always a good foundation for further conversation." "There will need to be further conversations," Kexmari added. Our collective will need to know about what happened here, about your reaction to our test. Test? Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. We realize now that it was, in effect, a test, Veltar explained. Though not the one we intended, we tested your capacity for violence and found something else entirely. Elena gathered her notes. When you report back to your collective, please make sure they understand that this conversation could be the beginning of something beneficial for both our species. Humanity has a lot to learn from Zephyrian biochemical knowledge, and perhaps we have perspectives that could be valuable to you as well. As the Zephyrians prepared to depart, Dr. Chen approached Veltar with his tablet. One more thing, he said. You mentioned that the compound requires volcanic temperatures to synthesize properly. Humans have developed some interesting high-temperature technologies. If you're interested, we might be able to suggest some equipment modifications that could make the process more efficient. Veltar stared at him for a long moment. You wish to help us improve our ability to create the substance that was designed to kill you? Dr. Chen shrugged. Efficiency is efficiency. And if we're going to be working with this stuff, better equipment benefits everyone. As the Zephyrian shuttle departed from Harmony's edge, Elena stood in the observation deck watching it disappear into the starfield. Think they'll actually share the recipe? Dr. Chen asked, joining her at the window. Oh, they'll share it, Elena said confidently. They're too curious about how we'll use it to keep it to themselves. And what will we use it for? Elena smiled. Exactly what we told them. Medical research, extreme cuisine challenges, and probably a dozen other things we haven't thought of yet. Dr. Chen laughed. You know, when I signed up for this mission, I never imagined I'd be helping establish diplomatic relations based on poison recipes. That's humanity for you, Elena replied. We specialize in finding the opportunities hidden inside the threats. As Harmony's edge began its journey back toward Earth, both humans were already thinking about the work ahead. Dr. Chen was planning research protocols for studying the compound's medical applications, while Elena was drafting her report to Earth Central Command. It would not be the last conversation between humans and Zephyrians. In fact, it would turn out to be the first of many, each one revealing new layers of complexity in the relationship between two species who had discovered that sometimes the best way to prevent conflict is to find common ground in the most unexpected places. The recipe, when it was eventually shared, would indeed become the foundation for groundbreaking medical research. It would also, as Elena had predicted, become the centerpiece of extreme cuisine challenges that would make Carolina Reaper contests look like children's games. But most importantly, it would become a symbol of the moment when humanity proved that sometimes the most powerful response to aggression is not retaliation, but curiosity. 3 weeks after the incident aboard Harmony's Edge, the research station New Horizon orbited Jupiter's moon Europa, its laboratories humming with unprecedented activity. Dr. Marcus Chen stood before a complex array of equipment, watching as his team carefully synthesized their first batch of what they had come to call Zephyrian fire. The collective had, true to Elena's prediction, provided the complete recipe along with detailed molecular specifications. They had also, somewhat reluctantly, assigned a scientific liaison to monitor the human experiments. Veltar now lived aboard the station, observing human behavior with the fascination of a xenobiologist studying a newly discovered species. Temperature approaching the threshold, announced Dr. Sarah Kim, Chen's lead biochemist. Crystalline structure is beginning to form. Veltar watched from behind protective barriers as the humans worked with equipment that generated temperatures hot enough to melt steel. His scales had shifted to a pale blue color that Chen had learned indicated anxiety. You realize, Veltar said for perhaps the 20th time, that a single error in this process could vaporize this entire section of the station? We realize, Chen replied calmly, making notes on his tablet. That's why we're taking appropriate precautions. Appropriate precautions for handling a substance designed to dissolve human tissue at the molecular level? Chen looked up from his tablet. Veltar, with respect, humans work with substances that can dissolve tissue at the molecular level every day. We call them acids. We also work with substances that can burn through steel, substances that can kill with microscopic amounts, and substances that can explode with tremendous force. The key is understanding what you're working with and respecting its properties. Through the observation window, they could see Dr. Kim making minute adjustments to the synthesis chamber. The process required precision that pushed human technology to its limits. But 3 weeks of trial and error had taught the team how to adapt their equipment to Zephyrian specifications. "Synthesis complete," Dr. Kim announced. "We have approximately 10 grams of pure compound." Veltar's scales darkened to navy blue. 10 grams of that substance could kill every human on this station within minutes. "Which is why we're not planning to eat 10 grams of it," Chen said reasonably. "We're planning to start with nanogram quantities and work our way up very, very slowly." The first volunteer for the human trials was, predictably, Dr. Chen himself. Despite protests from his team, his superiors, and especially from Veltar, Chen had insisted that as the project lead, he should be the first to test their work. "The dilution factor is 1 part compound to 10 billion parts carrier solution," Dr. Kim explained as she prepared the test dose. "At this concentration, the effect should be comparable to eating a moderately spicy pepper." "Should be," Veltar emphasized. "There are so many variables in human biochemistry that could affect the response." Chen was already strapping himself into the monitoring chair, sensors attached to every vital sign the team could measure. "That's why we're being careful. Medical team standing by, neutralizing agents prepared, emergency protocols in place." Dr. Kim approached with what looked like an ordinary glass of water. The compound was invisible, dissolved completely into the carrier solution, but Veltar could smell its presence even through the dilution. "Last chance to reconsider," Dr. Kim offered. Chen smiled and accepted the glass. "If humans had always chosen the safe path, we'd still be hiding in caves from lightning." He drank the solution in one swallow. For the first 30 seconds, nothing happened. Chen's vital signs remained normal, his expression unchanged. Veltar began to wonder if the dilution had been too extreme. Then Chen's eyes widened. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh, that's really something." His heart rate spiked on the monitors. His skin began to flush red. Sweat beaded on his forehead as his respiratory rate increased. "Chen?" Dr. Kim moved closer, ready to administer the neutralizing agent. No, I'm okay," Chen said, though his voice was strained. "It's just intense, like the burn from the hottest pepper I've ever eaten, but deeper somehow. It's affecting nerve pathways I didn't even know existed." Veltar watched in horrified fascination as Chen's body showed every sign of severe distress while Chen himself remained coherent and analytical. "The sensation is spreading," Chen continued, making observations even as tears streamed from his eyes. "It started in my mouth and throat, but now I can feel it in my chest, my stomach. It's following the digestive tract, but also affecting peripheral nervous system." "You're experiencing what we would consider a near-fatal poisoning," Veltar said, staring at the monitor readings. "Your inflammatory response indicators are through the ceiling." "But not actually fatal," Chen pointed out, though his words came out in gasps. "Just incredibly uncomfortable. How long does it typically last?" "For Zephyrians, this level of exposure would cause death within minutes." "Right. But for humans?" Dr. Kim was tracking the compound's progression through Chen's system. "Based on your current metabolic rate and the neutralization timeline we calculated, you should start feeling better in about 40 minutes. Chen nodded, then immediately regretted the movement. 40 minutes. I can do 40 minutes. Veltar's scales had shifted through several colors during this exchange, finally settling on what Chen had learned to recognize as deep confusion. You are voluntarily enduring extreme pain for the purpose of what exactly? Data collection, Chen managed between controlled breaths. Understanding how the compound affects human physiology, testing our neutralization protocols, proving that it can be done safely with proper preparation. But why would you want to prove that it can be done safely? Dr. Kim answered while monitoring Chen's vital signs. Because proving it can be done safely is the first step toward finding ways to do it that are actually enjoyable. This statement caused Veltar's translator to emit several seconds of static before producing, "I do not understand that sentence." Humans, Chen explained, wiping sweat from his face, have a tendency to take things that are initially unpleasant or dangerous and find ways to make them fun. We started with fire, which burns and kills, and turned it into cooking and warmth. We started with heights, which can cause fatal falls, and turned them into sport and entertainment. You're saying you intend to turn a deadly poison into entertainment? Among other things, yes. Over the following hours, as Chen recovered from his ordeal, he documented every aspect of the experience, the intensity of the sensation, the way it affected different neural pathways, the duration of various phases, and his body's recovery process. It's actually fascinating from a neurological perspective, he told Veltar once his vital signs had returned to normal. The compound doesn't just trigger pain receptors, it seems to enhance the sensitivity of the entire nervous system. For a few minutes there, I could feel things I've never felt before. Veltar's scales had returned to their normal blue-green color, but his posture still indicated confusion. You speak of this as though it were a positive experience. Parts of it were, Chen said honestly. The pain was intense, yes, but there were also moments of clarity, I suppose, like my awareness was heightened beyond normal human limits. Dr. Kim looked up from her analysis. The compound seems to affect neurotransmitter production in ways we've never seen before. During peak exposure, Chen's brain was producing elevated levels of at least 6 different chemicals associated with heightened consciousness and sensory processing. So it's not just pain, Chen mused. It's a complete neurological experience. Word of the successful human trial spread quickly through both human and Zephyrian communication networks. Within days, New Horizon was receiving requests from volunteers across the solar system who wanted to participate in further trials. Earth Central Command was fielding inquiries from extreme sports enthusiasts, neurological researchers, and even a few individuals who claimed they could handle anything. More surprisingly, the Zephyrian Collective was also experiencing an unexpected response. Reports began reaching the station of Zephyrian scientists requesting their own samples of the compound for study, not as a weapon, but as a tool for understanding consciousness and sensory experience. Kexmari arrived on the station 2 weeks after the first human trials, representing a faction within the collective that had become fascinated by human responses to their poison. Our scientists wish to understand, Kexmari explained to Chen during their first meeting, how your species transforms threat into opportunity. This appears to be a fundamental characteristic of human behavior that we did not account for in our original assessments. Chen was preparing for his 5th trial with the compound, this time at a slightly higher concentration. It's not just that we transform threats into opportunities, he said, checking the medical equipment. It's that we don't see them as mutually exclusive categories. Something can be both threatening and beneficial, dangerous and useful. This perspective is alien to us, Kexmari admitted. In our culture, harmful substances are avoided, not studied for recreational purposes. Dr. Kim, who had become the station's expert on Zephyrian human biochemical differences, looked up from her calculations. That might explain why your people never developed tolerance to the compound. If you avoid it completely, you never build up resistance or learn to manage the effects. You believe humans can develop tolerance to a substance that dissolves cellular structures. We believe humans can develop tolerance to almost anything, given time and proper conditioning, Chen said. It's one of our more unusual evolutionary adaptations. The fifth trial proceeded even more smoothly than the first. Chen's body had already begun adapting to the compound. His recovery time had improved significantly, and he was able to maintain cognitive function throughout the experience. But it was during the sixth trial, conducted with an audience of both human and Zephyrian observers, that something extraordinary happened. Chen had just consumed a dose roughly equivalent to what had nearly incapacitated him during the first trial. As expected, his vital signs spiked and his inflammatory response activated. But instead of the controlled suffering that had characterized his previous experiences, Chen began to laugh. Chen. Dr. Kim moved closer to the monitoring station. Are you all right? I'm fantastic, Chen replied, his voice clear despite the obvious physiological stress his body was experiencing. It's like, have you ever had the experience of stepping outside on a perfect day and feeling completely connected to everything around you? You're describing euphoria, Dr. Kim said, checking her readings. But that should be impossible. The compound is triggering massive pain responses throughout your nervous system. It is, Chen agreed. But it's also doing something else. It's like the pain is just one note in a much more complex symphony. Veltar and Kexmari exchanged glances. This was not how Zephyrians responded to their own compound. Describe the sensation more precisely, Kexmari requested. Chen closed his eyes, concentrating. It's as if every nerve ending in my body has been amplified. Yes, that includes the pain receptors, but it also includes everything else. I can feel the air moving in the room. I can sense the electromagnetic fields from the equipment. I think I can actually feel the gravitational pull of Jupiter. Dr. Kim was frantically taking notes. Chen, your brain activity is off the charts. You're showing patterns we've never recorded in humans before. The compound isn't just causing pain, Chen realized, his eyes still closed. It's removing the normal filters that limit human sensory input. We're experiencing everything our nervous system is capable of detecting, but we usually suppress most of it to prevent sensory overload. And instead of causing overload, Dr. Kim added, understanding the implications, humans are integrating the experience and finding patterns in it. Veltar's scales had shifted to a color neither human had seen before, a deep purple with silver highlights. You are suggesting that this substance, designed to cause death through overwhelming nervous system damage, is instead providing humans with enhanced consciousness. That appears to be exactly what's happening, Chen confirmed. At least once the human body adapts to the initial shock. The session continued for another hour, with Chen providing detailed descriptions of sensations and perceptions that seemed to transcend normal human experience. When the effects finally began to fade, he remained in a state of unusual clarity and focus. This changes everything, Dr. Kim said as she reviewed the data. If humans can not only tolerate this compound, but actually derive benefit from it, it suggests that our assessment of human limitations was fundamentally flawed, Kexmari finished. We designed a weapon based on our understanding of biological systems, but we failed to account for human adaptability. Veltar was examining the recorded data with something approaching awe. In our culture, this compound represents the pinnacle of dangerous biochemistry. Something to be handled only by specialists, prepared only for the gravest necessities. And in human culture, Chen said with a grin, it's about to become the main ingredient in the galaxy's most extreme recreational experience. News of the breakthrough spread rapidly through both civilizations. On Earth, research facilities began requesting samples and volunteers for expanded trials. Extreme sports communities started organizing waiting lists for access to the compound. Neuroscientists began theorizing about potential therapeutic applications for consciousness disorders and sensory processing issues. Among the Zephyrians, the response was more complicated. The faction that had originally proposed eliminating humanity was now facing the uncomfortable reality that their ultimate weapon had become humanity's latest recreational drug. Other factions were beginning to see humans not as a threat to be eliminated, but as a phenomenon to be studied and potentially learned from. Dr. Chen, meanwhile, had become something of a celebrity in both cultures. His willingness to serve as a test subject for an alien poison had somehow transformed him into a symbol of human-Zephyrian cooperation. "I never expected to become famous for being poisoned," he confided to Elena Rodriguez during a video call to Earth. "But I suppose stranger things have happened." Elena, who was preparing for her next diplomatic mission to the Zephyrian homeworld, laughed. "Marcus, you've managed to turn attempted genocide into a research partnership. I think that qualifies as one of the stranger diplomatic achievements in human history." "The really strange part," Chen said, looking out at the Jovian system, "is that I think this is just the beginning. If humans can adapt to Zephyrian poison, what else might we be able to adapt to? And what might other species have that they consider too dangerous to use, but that humans could find beneficial?" As if summoned by his words, Veltar appeared in the laboratory doorway, his scales showing the now familiar pattern that indicated he had news to share. "Dr. Chen," he said, "I have just received word from the collective. There are other species they wish to contact. Species they have avoided because their biochemistry produces substances too dangerous for Zephyrian interaction." Chen raised an eyebrow. "And they want humans to make contact instead?" "They want to know," Veltar said slowly, "if humans would be interested in expanding this research partnership to include compounds from other worlds." Dr. Kim looked up from her latest analysis. "How many other worlds are we talking about?" "Currently, 47 species with biochemistry deemed too hazardous for direct Zephyrian contact." Chen and Kim exchanged glances, then both began grinning. "Veltar," Chen said, "I think you should tell the collective that humans would be very interested in that expansion." As New Horizon continued its orbit around Europa, its laboratories now working on samples from multiple alien sources, Chen reflected on how quickly their understanding of human-alien relations had evolved. What had begun as a diplomatic dinner had become a research revolution, and what had been intended as humanity's end had instead become the foundation for unprecedented interspecies cooperation. The universe, it seemed, was about to discover that humans were even more adaptable than anyone, including humans themselves, had previously imagined. 6 months after the first contact with Zephyrian fire, the massive space station Synthesis hung in the neutral zone between 7 different star systems, its biodomes and laboratories representing the galaxy's most ambitious xenobiological research project. What had started as an attempt at human genocide had evolved into something unprecedented: the Galactic Biochemical Cooperation Initiative. Dr. Marcus Chen stood in the central laboratory, surrounded by samples from 47 different alien civilizations. Each substance had been deemed too dangerous for interspecies contact by the various galactic powers, but humans had systematically proven that too dangerous was often just another way of saying insufficiently understood. "Trial number 237, he announced to the recording equipment as he prepared to test a crystalline compound from the Helix Nebula. "Substance designation HN7, provided by the Crystalline Collective of Altair 9. Reported effects include complete molecular restructuring of carbon-based life forms." Veltar, now serving as the project's chief liaison officer, watched from the observation deck alongside representatives from 6 other species. In the months since humans had turned Zephyrian poison into recreational compounds, word had spread throughout the galaxy about humanity's unique biochemical tolerance. Species that had never considered peaceful contact with others were now sending samples and observers. "Dr. Chen," came the voice of Dr. Sarah Kim through the intercom. "We're reading some unusual energy signatures from that compound. Are you sure you want to proceed with the full dose?" Chen examined the small crystal in his hand. It pulsed with an internal light that seemed to shift through colors beyond human visual perception. "The preliminary tests suggest it's safe at this concentration, and the Altarians assured us that what they call molecular restructuring might just be their term for intense biochemical interaction. The Altarians also assured us that no carbon-based life form had ever survived contact with HN7, Veltar pointed out from the observation deck. "Which is exactly why we need to test it," Chen replied. "How many times have we heard that now? And how many times has it turned out to mean no one ever tried the right approach?" The truth was, humans had surprised everyone, including themselves, with their biochemical adaptability. The Zephyrian fire trials had led to successful human interaction with compounds from the volcanic worlds of Sigma Draconis, the gas giant colonies of Wolf 359, and even the quantum crystalline entities from the Andromeda relay stations. Each substance that had been considered universally lethal had proven manageable for properly prepared humans. Chen placed the crystal under his tongue and activated the monitoring systems. The effect was immediate and unlike anything he had experienced in his previous trials. Instead of the intense sensory amplification of Zephyrian fire or the temporal perception shifts of draconian plasma juice, HN7 seemed to restructure his consciousness itself. "Chen?" Dr. Kim's voice sounded distant, though she was speaking directly into his earpiece. "We're reading some very strange neural patterns." Chen tried to respond, but found that language had become unnecessary. He could perceive Dr. Kim's concern directly, feel Veltar's anxious curiosity from the observation deck, sense the electromagnetic thoughts of the crystalline collective representatives who existed as living silicon matrices. "I can," he began, then stopped. How could he explain that he was experiencing reality from multiple perspectives simultaneously? "I think I can understand what the Altarians meant by molecular restructuring. It's not changing my physical structure, it's changing how I process information at the quantum level." The crystalline collective representatives had moved closer to the observation window, their silicon forms pulsing with excited energy patterns. "Human Chen," one of them communicated through their translation matrix, "you are integrating quantum consciousness states that we believed were impossible for biological entities." "It's not impossible," Chen realized, his awareness expanding to encompass the quantum interactions throughout the entire station. "It's just a different way of processing information, like learning a new language, except the language is reality itself." Dr. Kim was frantically taking readings as Chen's brain activity showed patterns that shouldn't have been possible with human neural architecture. "Chen, you're somehow maintaining coherent thought while your brain is operating in quantum superposition states." "Multiple superposition states," Chen corrected, watching his own thoughts branch into parallel probability streams. "I can see potential futures, alternative presents, and I think I understand why the Altarians have never been able to communicate effectively with other species." "Explain," Veltar requested, his scales shifting to the deep purple color that indicated intense intellectual focus. "They exist in quantum consciousness," Chen said, his perception returning to something approaching normal human awareness as the compound's effects began to stabilize. "Every thought they have explores multiple probability states simultaneously. When they try to communicate with linear-thinking species like yourselves, it's like trying to explain a symphony to someone who can only hear one note at a time." The implications were staggering. The crystalline collective had been isolated from galactic civilization, not because they were hostile, but because their method of consciousness was so different that meaningful communication had been impossible. "And you can serve as a translator," one of the collective representatives stated, their excitement causing their crystalline form to emit harmonic resonances throughout the station. "I think so," Chen said, still feeling the lingering effects of quantum awareness. "At least while the compound is active. It's like being bilingual. Except one language is linear consciousness and the other is quantum probability." The success with HN7 opened doors that had been sealed since the galaxy's first attempts at interstellar cooperation. Within weeks, Synthesis Station was hosting representatives from species that had been considered fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. The void dancers of deep space, whose biochemistry operated in 11 dimensions, found that humans dosed with their essence. Fragments could perceive and interact with higher dimensional space. The Time Weavers from the galactic core, whose temporal biochemistry made them seem like myths to linear time species, discovered that humans could serve as temporal anchors that allowed meaningful conversation across time streams. Each breakthrough led to new partnerships, new research opportunities, and new understanding of what consciousness and intelligence could be. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as the Chief Diplomatic Officer for the Galactic Cooperation Initiative, stood in the station's central conference chamber addressing representatives from 37 species. The chamber itself was a marvel of adaptive engineering, with environmental controls that could simultaneously support methane breathers, silicon-based crystalline entities, energy beings that existed as pure electromagnetic phenomena, and traditional biological species. 6 months ago, she began, the concept of this gathering would have been considered impossible. "We have species here whose biochemistries are so different that mere physical proximity should be lethal to at least half the attendees." Murmurs of agreement came from various translation devices around the chamber. "And yet," Elena continued, "we have learned that impossible and previously untested are not synonymous. Human volunteers have now successfully interfaced with biochemical compounds from every species represented in this chamber. In many cases, these interactions have revealed new possibilities for consciousness, perception, and understanding that benefit all our civilizations." Veltar, now serving as the Zephyrian representative to the initiative, stood to address the assembly. "The Zephyrian Collective wishes to formally acknowledge that our initial assessment of humanity was incomplete. We viewed human adaptability as a threat to galactic stability, when in fact it appears to be the key to galactic cooperation." The crystalline collective representative chimed in with harmonic overtones, their translation matrix rendering their thoughts. "The humans have demonstrated that consciousness is not fixed, but adaptive. They bridge gaps we did not know could be bridged." Dr. Chen entered the chamber as the discussion continued. Still slightly disoriented from his latest trial with a temporal compound that had allowed him to experience causality from the perspective of the Time Weavers. He took his seat at the Research Council table as Elena continued her presentation. "The question before us now," Elena said, "is how to structure ongoing cooperation between species whose fundamental biochemistries and consciousness types are radically different." "The answer," Chen said, standing to address the assembly, "might be simpler than we think. Humans can serve as biological translators, but we don't have to be the only ones." He activated the chamber's holographic display, showing the results of 6 months of research. "Every species we've tested has compounds that affect human consciousness in unique ways. But we've also discovered that humans dosed with certain compounds can actually synthesize new substances that bridge different biochemical systems." The implications rippled through the chamber as translation devices worked to convey the concept across 37 different modes of consciousness. "You're proposing," Veltar said slowly, That humans could serve as living factories for creating biochemical interfaces between any two species? Not just proposing, Chen replied. We've already done it. Dr. Kim and her team have successfully created hybrid compounds that allow Zephyrians to safely experience aspects of crystalline quantum consciousness, Altarian time perception, and even limited interface with Void Dancer multidimensional awareness. The chamber erupted in sounds, harmonic frequencies, electromagnetic bursts, and quantum fluctuations as 37 species expressed amazement simultaneously. Elena smiled as she watched the chaos of interspecies excitement. This brings us to our proposal for the next phase of the initiative. We would like to establish permanent research colonies where volunteers from all our species can participate in supervised biochemical exchange programs. Exchange programs? Asked the representative from the methane kingdoms, their translation producing a sound like crystalline wind chimes. Dr. Kim, joining the presentation via hologram from her laboratory, explained, controlled exposure to alien biochemistry, with human volunteers serving as test subjects and translators. The goal would be to create a library of safe interface compounds that allow any species to temporarily experience consciousness from the perspective of any other species. The silence that followed was profound, stretching across multiple dimensions of space-time as various representatives processed the implications. Finally, the Time Weaver representative spoke, their words arriving from 3 different temporal coordinates simultaneously. Past, present, future consensus indicates this proposal represents evolutionary leap point for galactic civilization development will be. I think that's a yes, Chen said quietly to Elena. The Void Dancer representative manifested briefly in 11-dimensional space before collapsing back to 3 dimensions to communicate. The dance pattern suggests unprecedented harmony motion across consciousness space. We participate, agree, harmonize. One by one, the other species voiced their agreement. Even the most cautious representatives acknowledge that the potential benefits of true interspecies understanding outweighed the risks. As the formal session concluded, Elena found herself standing with Veltar and Chen in the observation lounge, watching the incredible sight of 37 different species ships preparing to depart for their homeworlds to begin preparations for the new colonies. You know, Veltar said, his scales showing the deep blue-green color that indicated contentment. When we first planned to poison you, we never imagined it would lead to this. Chen laughed. To be honest, when we asked for the recipe, we never imagined it would lead to this either. We thought we might get some interesting hot sauce out of it. And instead, you got galactic civilization, Elena observed. Actually, Chen said, we got both. The Zephyrian fire hot sauce is selling extremely well on Earth. There's apparently a waiting list of 3 million people who want to try it. Veltar's scales flickered between colors rapidly, which Chen had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of laughter. Humans are the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. That's probably true, Elena agreed. But unpredictability has its advantages. If we were more predictable, you would have successfully poisoned us 6 months ago, and none of this would have happened. As they watched the ships departing, each carrying plans for research colonies and cooperation protocols, Chen reflected on how far they'd all come. What had started as an attempt at genocide had become the foundation for unprecedented galactic cooperation. The poisons designed to destroy humanity had instead become the tools that allowed humanity to bridge gaps between species that had seemed unbridgeable. There's something poetic about it, he said finally. The substances meant to end humanity became the means for humanity to help other species understand each other. There's something human about it, Elena corrected. Finding opportunity in threat, turning weapons into tools, making friends out of enemies. Veltar nodded, understanding better than he had 6 months ago. Perhaps that is why the galaxy needed humans after all. Not despite your unpredictability, but because of it. As Synthesis Station continued its orbit in the neutral zone, now serving as the headquarters for the most ambitious cooperation project in galactic history, reports began coming in from the first research colonies. Zephyrians were successfully experiencing crystalline quantum consciousness. Methane breathers were learning to perceive 11-dimensional space. Energy beings were discovering what it meant to have biological form. And at the center of it all, human volunteers continued to do what humans did best: adapt, survive, and find ways to turn the impossible into the routine. Dr. Chen, now known throughout the galaxy as the human who had first survived Zephyrian poison, had become something of a legend. But he remained focused on the work, driven by the same curiosity that had led him to drink alien poison in the first place. "What's next?" Elena asked as they prepared to return to their respective duties. Chen smiled. Looking out at the star field, where ships from dozens of species traveled between research colonies, carrying compounds and volunteers for ever more ambitious consciousness exchange experiments. "Well," he said, "we've received word from the Andromeda Galaxy. Apparently they've been watching our progress, and they have some biochemical challenges they think we might find interesting." Elena and Veltar both stared at him. "You're not serious," Veltar said. "Dead serious. Intergalactic biochemical cooperation. Think of the research opportunities." Elena shook her head, but she was smiling. "Marcus, 6 months ago you nearly died from drinking alien poison. Now you're planning to drink poison from another galaxy?" "Elena," Chen replied, 6 months ago, that poison was meant to kill all of humanity. Now it's the foundation for galactic peace. I think intergalactic cooperation is a natural next step." As the three of them returned to their work, Chen to his laboratory, Elena to her diplomatic duties, and Veltar to his liaison responsibilities, the station hummed with activity. In dozens of laboratories, humans and aliens worked together to understand consciousness, biochemistry, and the possibilities that emerged when different forms of life chose cooperation over conflict. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the best way to prevent a threat is not to eliminate it, but to understand it. And sometimes the most dangerous substances can become the most valuable tools if you're willing to approach them with curiosity instead of fear. Humanity had proven that adaptability was more than survival. It was the foundation for building bridges across the seemingly impossible gulfs between different forms of life and consciousness. And as news of their success spread to neighboring galaxies, it became clear that this was only the beginning of a much larger story about what became possible when species chose to learn from each other instead of destroying each other. The poison that was meant to end humanity had instead become humanity's gift to the galaxy. The proof that no difference was too great to bridge, no gap too wide to cross, and no threat too dangerous to transform into an opportunity for greater understanding.